let me pass over to Inga, all the way from Iceland, where at this time of the year, as you said, the sun never sets. So I'll pass over to Inga to give us a overview of a past crisis that she was instrumental in helping manage while at Visit Iceland, and then some perspectives on how Iceland, but also some other destinations. I know you're going to briefly look at Denmark and my home country of New Zealand in terms of how they're grappling with this, and then a quick update on Iceland's reopening for international travelers. So thanks again for joining us today, Inga. Over to you.
Thank you, and I'm so excited to be with you, and it's been really interesting to listen to both Amir and John, and this benchmarking study sounds really, really exciting to have. To start with, like Chris said, I'm going to look at the past crisis and also to look at the sort of the domestic marketing, and also how we've been opening Iceland in the last few days. But if you start with the crisis in 2010, I don't know if how many of you remember the Eyjafjallajökull, the unpronounceable name, but we had a bit of a how do you say that, disruption here in Iceland in 2010 in April. But this was sort of the media was showing Iceland like this, covered with ash, and people really in a bad state in that sense. But it was also showing beautiful pictures from Iceland as well. But it was interrupting flights all over Europe, especially, and the reality, however, was this: that the ash was actually going away from Iceland. So the crisis were more in Europe and in the flight business around the world, interrupting people's life in the sense that they were not able to travel. This was a huge crisis for the Icelandic tourism industry at the time, because in April you're starting to thinking about the summer season, which was the most important season at the time. We only had around 500,000 tourists coming to Iceland a year, and we were starting to recover from the financial crisis. At this time in April, we were foreseeing that we would have minus 20% in incoming traveling to Iceland for the summer season. For the businesses, this was a shock, basically. So what do you actually do when you're in crisis? Well, we actually joined forces, and we managed to gather around 120 stakeholders together within almost a week. But first of all, we started what we called a crisis group, and a crisis group that was sitting down and discussing the situation around the world, how Iceland was in the media, and so on. And we all know that a volcano doesn't go on forever. So we decided to prepare a campaign that started immediately when it was safe to travel to Iceland. And at this time, we actually managed to get 1/3 of the nation to take part in the campaign, sort of harnessing the people power in that sense, and getting a very consistent message to the world. But I don't know if you remember the Inspired by Iceland campaign, but we have been going on with the Inspired by Iceland logo and the brand for over a decade now. And basically, at the end of the year 2010, we ended up with 1% increase for the year instead of 20%. And the people and the stakeholders were so happy with how we had been working together that we kept going for almost a decade. But if you look at today's crisis and wonder, what can we take out of the crisis in 2010? I take 4 points out of what we were doing at the time. We were trying to bring something good to the world. We were telling positive stories from Iceland. We were telling something that was uplifting, relevant to the situation, basically. And I think that's still relevant today for today's crisis. We keep telling the stories of our destinations in a positive way and uplifting for everyone that are sitting at home and dreaming about traveling. We also created a crisis group, a public-private group, about 10 to 15 people, and we were reassessing the strategy. We were meeting almost daily in the beginning, and we kept meeting weekly for over a year almost, discussing the situation and what we could do better and so on. We also developed a platform for cooperation and support, and the platform is for all stakeholders. It's not only the public-private, the 10 people, it was for everyone, both the international platform and also other stakeholders. I sometimes say it's something where you can cry on each other's shoulders, basically. It's something where you can have that discussion. And also what we are doing today to network around the world, have a discussion with other countries, look at what other destinations are doing and so on. But in today's crisis, we also have to consider that the health and safety. We saw from Amir in the report how important that is. And I think we have to consider that very well. Also the problems that we had before COVID, because the sustainable development goals and the responsibility of destinations is not going away at all. So I think, reassessing the strategies and having a crisis group and cooperation, this is something that we can put into the same equation and work for us together. So that brings us to domestic travel in a way, because if you look at the domestic travel, in Iceland, the domestic market is not going to save the Icelandic tourism because we are only 350,000. And in the last few years, we've had over 2 million travelers. So it's never going to compensate that. But in New Zealand, for example, you have 60% that is domestic travel. This is a completely different scenario from Iceland. But still, you have some kind of a positive story to say and get people to move and get more kind of a positive towards positive towards traveling in that sense. And I had a look at 3 cases just to give some brief. And I've been writing some articles on LinkedIn, which you can find and get more information. And I have quotes on the slides that you can have a look at to get a deeper understanding. In Denmark, they have what they call Bare Denmark, Meget mere and Bare Denmark. That means it's just so much more than Denmark. And it's basically playing on the idea that when you say that you're not traveling abroad, you say, I'm just staying at home, but you're still traveling in your destination. So that's the idea of Bare Denmark. It's playing on the idea that you're not only in Denmark, you're doing something more. And the destination and the Visit Denmark is asking people to share what they're doing when they're just in Denmark. And giving people idea of that. And they have a competition going on. I think you can win $3,000 US dollars if you get a good picture on the website that they have created for this campaign. So they're trying to play on the variety and what Denmark has to offer in a positive way. If you look at Iceland, it's a bit of a different kind of approach. There's a domestic campaign going on, which is basically just encouraging you to travel in that sense. But what is a bit unique from other destinations is that the government decided to give a gift certificate from the government to everyone that is over 18 years old. And everyone that is 18 years old will get a gift certificate of $30 that they can use in Icelandic tourism in the year of 2020. And this just started last week. And there are also a lot of companies that are starting to have like offers and trying to get people to use the gift certificate with them. You also have the domestic campaign that it's really pushing the industry to update for the domestic market, because in Iceland we've never really looked at the domestic market. I don't know if the US is the same or in your destinations, but in Iceland we've never been looking at it. We've always been looking abroad. So it's kind of refreshing to see Facebook pages popping up about different kind of areas in Iceland and people asking for advice and so on. So this has been a very positive in that sense, that people are really thinking about Iceland as a destination and appreciating the sort of the infrastructure that has been happening in the last few years with the increase in tourism, which has been enormous, as you can see from 2010. If you look at New Zealand, they have this campaign that they call Do Something New, New Zealand. And apparently this is something that is a beginning of a bigger campaign in the next few months. But the idea is that people are telling about, something that they're taking off the bucket list. So they're really encouraging people to do something new. By like for Iceland, they're just encouraging people to travel in general. This is really interesting, and there's a link to the video there. And like I said, is a bit of a different approach. But in this, I think it has been quite positive. And even though it's not mandatory, but the Prime Minister in New Zealand was encouraging businesses to only have a 4 days business week, which is, the idea is that people would then travel over the 3 days weekend. I think this is a really interesting and kind of a nice approach in this. I don't know, and Chris probably knows that better than me, if that actually has been happening, if companies have actually been doing the 4 weeks or not. but it is a positive kind of a thing in my mind. And also, I think, because I've been thinking a lot about this with the domestic travel as well. You know, I know that Miles Partnership has been doing some kind of a benchmark and looking at the domestic marketing and how that's best done. I think it's really interesting to see and wonder if, you know, with increased domestic travel, if it have a positive impact on the sustainable development of the destinations. Because before COVID, we had a lot of conversation on the over tourism and the destinations, and you know how we want them to develop for the future. And if you think about it, if you get the domestic traveler to be a more of a storyteller for your destination, is it possible that he will be telling more of the story that he wants to be told from his destination, because it's a destination where he lives, where he works, where he will, you know, respects the nature and the environment and so on. So it's just an idea if we can try to sort of harness the domestic traveler more than we've done in the past, or more than I've actually seen, at least in the Nordics. But at last, if we discuss a little bit on the opening of Iceland, we've actually stayed open the whole time. We had flights from London and Stockholm the whole time, but you always had to go into a quarantine when you came to Iceland. But on the 15th of June, there was a new where we started testing at the borders. And the testing is going to be free until 1st of July, but it's basically it will cost around 112 US dollars. And it has been going on now for almost 10 days from now on. And but you also have to, it's not mandatory, the testing is mandatory, but it's not mandatory, but you are also asked to download an app where we can follow, or the Icelandic authorities can follow you in Iceland. So in case you're in a place where there is a kind of a infection or something like that going on, they can actually contact you. And majority of Icelandic people have this app in their phones, and I think everyone are kind of happy to do that while we are in this situation. We also have had quite a good team from the Icelandic authorities that has been representing, and like they say, the science has guided the path, and it will continue to do so. That has been the mantra in this, that they're not doing anything that they don't feel safe. But in the end of this, I think also, which is has been quite nice for all of you that are interested in Iceland. Iceland Air is also having a campaign right now that they call Iceland is Open, with the hashtag Iceland is Open, where they are encouraging Icelandic people to showcase what Iceland has to offer and what we are doing right now around the country in our summer vacations, because majority of people right now are traveling around and enjoying the cold Icelandic summer. We have 11 degrees at the moment, but you know, we're always optimistic that it's going to be warmer, but it never is. But like I say, I hope you can ask me questions, and you can stay in touch on my LinkedIn profile. But yeah, and I hope I have given you some kind of insight into this.
Thank you so much, Inga. You mentioned New Zealand there. We are lucky enough to work with a number of New Zealand destinations. And of course, Tourism New Zealand have launched that campaign, Do Something New, New Zealand. And the early results look positive. So domestic travel numbers have rebounded and are quite strong. Events have restarted. So rugby, the national sport in New Zealand, can have full stadiums. And I think the experience to date with New Zealand just really emphasizes what Amir pointed out, that this is a health crisis. Yeah. If you can get on top of the health issues, so New Zealand's effectively eradicated COVID-19 within its borders. It still has cases coming in that are quarantined on arrival. But if it can maintain that, then it creates this confidence, this sense that you can get out and about. So more important than anything we can do in travel and tourism is talk to our government officials, our health officials, about greater investment and greater coordination around tackling the health issue. And I think that's frankly the big gap and issue we have here in the US.